My sister Lee asked for the recipe to No Knead Bread, and I'm feeling so terribly guilty for not being here next weekend when she's in New England that I decided to put some extra effort into it and make her a video. Here's what you'll need: salt, water, and instant yeast. You can also use rapid rise yeast if you'd like. I like to use white whole wheat flour, 1 part white whole wheat to 2 parts all-purpose. I buy the yeast in bulk these days, and I find that a little more than a 1/4 teaspoon, kind of a healthy 1/4 teaspoon, is actually better. They call for a teaspoon and 1/4 of salt. I don't want to use that much salt, so I'm putting about 1/2 teaspoon in. And then 1 5/8 cup of water. Now, I'm doubling the recipe, so that actually ends up being 3 1/3 cups of water, and I'm just going to pour it right in. I do usually use warm water. My theory is that it probably gets the yeast going a little bit. I don't really know if I'm right. So mix the dough up with a spatula, and as they say in the original recipe, it'll be a little shaggy, and that's quite true. You kind of get an idea of how dry this stuff is. It's always a little different each time I make it because I'm not real accurate at how I measure the flour. All right, 16 hours later, and our dough has done a lot of rising. Like it's really gotten quite wet and sticky looking. And see how stringy that dough is? That's all the gluten that has, I don't know, released, activated, whatever gluten does, by having just lots of time. So now I'm going to take this and put it onto some freezer paper that I have coated lightly with cooking spray. Be right back. Alright, the original recipe calls for taking this dough that has been rising for 14 to 20 hours or something like that, putting it on a floured surface, folding it over 4 times, putting that hunk of dough on a towel that's been floured, and then covering it with another towel that's been floured, and let it rest for 2 hours before putting it in your pot to cook. That's way too much work and way too much mess. So here's what I have devised. I take a piece of freezer paper, which is just, it's like parchment paper, only about 1/3 of the cost or 1/4 of the cost. It has a shiny side to it, and I put the shiny side up, but I still coat it with a little cooking oil just to ensure that it won't stick. And today I'm trying something different. I've coated my spatula with cooking oil. And I put the freezer paper on a cookie sheet because this thing is going to kind of spread and grow like an amoeba. If you don't contain it somehow, you can't move it around in case you need the counter space or could overrun the paper. So here comes the dough. You can see how stringy this is, and it's full of holes, kind of like Swiss cheese. Again, I think that's the benefit of letting it sit for so many hours and really let the gluten start to work. So here's a beautiful pile of dough. When it kind of keeps a shape like this a little bit, that's good. That's a good sign. If it's a little too runny, you're going to have some trouble. But I'm just going to fold it over onto itself a few times to, it's not really to shape it. I think it's just to, you know what, give it some exercise. Okay, and that's really all there is to it. You can't really do too much with it. And so now I bring the freezer paper over. I'm going to just clip it together. I'm going to clip it right here with the clip that I can't reach because I forgot to bring it over. Just to cover it, help keep some of the moisture in, keep some of the dog hair out. And now it sits like this for a couple hours. But you can actually get away with just 1 hour if you want. And since it takes about 20 minutes or so for your oven to heat, I usually go about an hour, start the oven, and when the oven is ready, then I go ahead and go for it. See you in a bit. Okay, it's been, I don't really even know how long, at least an hour, hour and a half, maybe even 2 hours. the dough has been resting or having its second rise. And I have at times even forgotten about it for up to 4 hours, and it just never seems to matter. This is a very forgiving recipe. So what I have done is I've preheated the oven to 475. The original recipe says 450, some people say 500, so I split the difference. And I put my pot, which I guess is not really called a Dutch oven, Mom tells me, but I thought it was. It's cast iron anyway. You can use cast iron, ceramic, or Pyrex, no metal. And I've already preheated the pot. That's important. The original recipe says a 5 to 7 quart pot. This is a 5-quart pot. I think it doesn't really even have to be that big, to be honest. And I do spray a little bit more cooking spray in there. And before I put the dough in, I'll just show it to you. You can see it's kind of flattened itself out and is just waiting to slide off the paper. So here we go. Into the hot pot. And because I used a little cooking spray, it really does just slide right off this paper eventually, which means you don't really disturb it. You still get all those nice big airy Swiss cheese pockets of gas, I guess it is. And I like to put some toasted sesame seeds on the top. I just shake them on there liberally. You might be hearing that the dough is sizzling against the hot pan. It doesn't really matter what it looks like because it's going to settle itself out when it cooks. So now we're going to cover it and cook it. Again, the original recipe says 30 minutes or 30 to 40. I do it for 45 minutes when I make a double batch because I really like the crust to be crusty. So it's going back in, 475, covered for 45 minutes. And then in 45 minutes, I'm going to uncover it and give it another 15 minutes until it's good and brown. I'll see you then. Okay, 10 minutes is up. Don't forget to turn the oven off. Up comes the bread. Ooh, beautiful, crusty loaf of bread. Put it on the rack to cool. Voila. Isn't that beautiful?